I see a lot of people posting about a 1% a day principle that James Clear and others speak about. How and why does it work?
The 1% concept tries to answer the question of why so few people get the majority of the rewards. You have to look back, it kind of started back in like the 1800s in Italy. Some Italian economist called Pareto, he noticed that the smallest proportion of pea pods were producing the biggest majority of his peas. After realizing this, he started to notice it elsewhere as well. So the first place he noticed it was in Italian land ownership. About 20% of the population owned 80% of the land. And then the same thing happened with British income tax records, where he found once again that the majority of rewards were accrued by the small majority of the people. The numbers were all never exactly the same, but it was the same pattern. So this idea that a small number of things accounted for by the majority of the results became known as the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. And in the decades that followed, his work became gospel for economists all around the world, and people were noticing the same patterns in other things like sports like the NBA and football, and in other measures like world wealth levels. Now, three principles further explain why people practice the 1%, like it's a religion. And the first one is the power of this accumulative advantage, which basically says that a small advantage gets bigger over time. One plant only needs a slight edge in the beginning to crowd out the competition and take over the entire forest. Now, the second principle is the idea that winner takes it all effect, where, like plants in the rainforest, humans are often competing for the same resources. Politicians compete for the same votes, authors the same readers, athletes the same gold medal. So in situations like these, being a little bit better than the competition leads to an outsized result because the winner does take it all. You only need to win by 1% or 1 millisecond or $1, but you capture 100% of the victory. The advantage of being a little bit better is not a little bit more reward, but the entire reward. So this winner takes all effect is in individual competitions can lead to the winner takes most effects in the larger game of life. So if you go back to the 1% number, if you start with the number 1 and add 1% to it every day over the course of a year, you get 37.8% better at whatever you were starting over a year. Conversely, if you get 1% worse at something every day over the course of a year, you'll end up 3% as good as you used to be on day 1. You'll end up with 0.03 of how good you were if you had 1 at the beginning. The difference between getting 1% worse, 1% better at something over the course of a year ends up in a 1.5 thousand times difference. There you go. And yeah, the magic is in the consistency of the approach. Little steps done consistently make a big difference. So what does 1% mean in practice? Let's say you have a normal job, which equates to about 500 minutes a day. 1% of 500 minutes is 5 minutes. So being able to find 5 minutes every day to make the magic happen is pretty easy in essence. So do it.